Good evening. On behalf of the Alumni Affairs, Alumni Association, College of Engineering and Applied Science, thank you so much for investing your time with us this evening. A few housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. Please type your questions for the panelists using the Q&A tab, not the chat tab. That way we'll see them all. Perfect. My name is Reavis. I am the evening's moderator. Spent 20 years in sales and business development in the technology industry. We have assembled an outstanding panel of alumnus to talk with you about careers in technology. We'll discuss their journey from Albany to the Bay Area and beyond, and some trends in technology from their point of view and how to break into the tech industry. Before we start the panel, I'd like to get your input. There's going to be a survey on the screen as you sign in. Please log in what college you're from, so we have a better idea of how to structure our questions and tailor them to the group. So thank you for that. We hope that regardless of your major, you will take something away from this event, a new concept, a fresh perspective on the prospects in tech, and maybe the notion that a trip outside of the state of New York might be worth pursuing. So why don't we welcome our panelists to the session. Thank you, everyone. Before we get started, I think we have some word from Brendan Tejaf, the president of Ieee. Would like to say a few words.
Thank you, John. I would like to thank all the panelists for spending some of their time to talk to everyone tonight, to give insight to all the students that are attending on how the industry works or maybe how to get in. Personally, I really appreciate that you guys as alumni are coming back to help students who are currently in this college as well. I find that to be very, very cool. Thank you for your time.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your input, Brendan, that you've shared with us for questions with your professors. We want to have a real spirited dialogue that, gets back to what you students are interested in and the understanding that we have on the panel. So with that, let's see, I'm going to start off. I'm going to probably start with Sue and then go Evan and Rob. Sue, if you could introduce yourself, give us your brief background, perhaps your high school hometown, or where you lived at the institution, that'd be great. So
I'm Sue Shanabrook. I grew up in Kingston, New York, and had moved to Florida, but went back up to Albany for school. I ended up doing my bachelor's and master's while I was there, and then went directly from there to IBM and started off my career, and then I was launched.
Hey everyone, my name is Evan Chao. I grew up in actually Jackson Heights in Queens, New York. I always thought I was gonna be a native New Yorker. I never thought I was gonna leave the great state of New York, but the opportunities came by, and I went to stretch that itch at Silicon Valley. While I was in New York, while I was in Albany, I started off staying on Dutch Quad, and then in my junior year, I moved off campus somewhere. Off campus. Off campus. I forget there's a place called Bernstein Street. So many good years there.
Great.
Sure. So John, should I introduce myself as well? Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, yes.
So my name is Rob Bernstein. I grew up Brooklyn and Long Island, and went to Albany from 91 to 95. Business, obviously, and then focused specifically concentrating in management information systems. I got out, worked at Anderson Consulting, or Accenture, what's Accenture today, for a number of years, got my MBA, and then came out to Silicon Valley in roughly, I guess, summer of 2001. And I've been out here since in various at various technology companies.
Thank you for that. One interesting note is that Rob, I loved your dance video on YouTube. Was that you breakdancing?
The best I could do.
Right on, bringing New York to California. Okay, let's get right into some of the questions. First question up, you guys, is what are the skills, what skills did you learn at the University of Albany that helped you most in your career? Anyone can jump in on that one.
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, I'll tell you, I can remember a time when I remember it was in the MI's class in undergrad. We were doing some group project, right? And one of the things that happened was there was someone that may have not done all of their part of the work, but it didn't matter, right? Because at that time it was all about, well, from a group perspective, from a team player perspective, what was the task at hand? We had to get, we had to present out that semester long project that we had all been working on, regardless of who is, holding up the end of the bargain or not. So one of the lessons I would say or skills I learned was when you think about tasks at hand, the business problem that you're trying to solve for, right? You could dwell on some of the dynamics of the group, right? But really understanding that, the team has to pull together and you may need to lead at times, right? To get the team to pull together to get the task done rather than, spending energies towards kind of covering yourself or explaining why, certain things were not done in an optimal fashion. It's just one of those earlier lessons when from the group that I was in terms of the class presentation, we could have dwelled on what the problems were, but instead we pulled together, we chipped in terms of where the gaps were, and it turned out to be a great presentation. And no one knew none the better on who did what. Because at the end of the day, the task at hand was accomplished. There's something that I take away from in terms of early on in my career and actually all throughout, where you gotta understand where to spend your energies, and it's not necessarily about, hey, whose fault it was or who didn't do what, right? It's about celebrating the wins and making sure that the team gets there together.
So I would almost frame that as like a soft skill, huh?
Yeah.
You do great. Okay, perfect. All right, Sue, what are your thoughts?
Well, so the interesting thing is like Evan, my story when I was thinking about this was also related to a group project with a slightly different twist, which I think maybe what you can take away from that is like, you learn technical skills in college, you learn how to think, but what really matters is that whole how to think thing as opposed to the specific technology. But what I remember for my group project is we had the same challenge where we had someone who really wasn't doing any work. Now, we had some really basic source control at the time, but not that much. And the person decided at the 11th hour to do some work and overwrote a bunch of our work with bad and outdated code. So we spent a fair amount of time recovering that. But I learned a lot from that experience. I think both, as Evan talked about, like at the end of the day, you have to get the work done and things go wrong along the way. But then also specifically really about protecting your work and the progress that you've made, right? And I think that in technology, there's a lot of, few steps forward, a few steps backward, and being able to protect the progress that you make along the way is really important to make sure that you don't lose that.
Perfect.
Well, for me, as Evan said, for me, teamwork certainly was a big one in MIS, doing group work, doing group presentations, group research, all of that. Business presentation, the importance of persuasion, the importance of how to articulate ideas in ways that people will connect to them and absorb them in the way that you'd want. I think a very strong technical basis, technical foundation. that I got at Albany is I still lean on today and have for the last few decades. And for me specifically, I would say probably a certain level of discipline. I had my own sort of growth spurt in college, the kind that I didn't really have in high school or earlier, where I learned, your first time out on your own, you're living away from your family, and the only real meaningful measure back is, how you do, your grades and how you perform. And so I learned a lot of my time management, discipline kind of skills during those 4 years.
Wonderful. Okay. So if we flip that, what didn't you learn at the U of Albany that you wish you would have known?
For me, just to continue on, I mean, for me, I wish the classes were available. I didn't take them, but I wish I'd learned deeper finance. The MIS program didn't expose me enough to finance. And when I got my MBA later on, since it was taught through the Socratic method, I didn't learn much through that either. So I had to learn it practically on my own. And the other one that I think is really critical and very difficult to teach, though, is actual sales. That's something that I think academia in general has a hard time helping folks figure out how to do. But I think, perhaps more sessions where people are practicing the art of persuasion and doing more case studies and interacting and seeing if the other side actually buys, if you will, and at whatever price point, that type of thing. I think that would really prepare students well.
Good insight on that one. We'll bring that back to student affairs. Sue, what are your thoughts?
I think that if you look at I guess it's been a theme already throughout this, is persuasion. And to me, a lot of persuasion comes down to writing and being able to make the case for things. And it's 15 years ago, I remember telling my kids, like, if you look at higher level jobs in general, and even like senior software engineer jobs, like jobs that are 8 years into career or whatever, they all look for excellent communication skills, right? And I've told people before, like, because if people are shy and won't share the information that they've had, I've told them, you can be as smart as you want to be, but if you're not going to bring it out and be able to present it to myself and others so that we can understand it, it's hard to have your intelligence making an impact on the business that we're driving. So I think, again, it's not something that the school doesn't offer, or I don't know what classes are offered, but that, that writing for like clarity and like technical clarity and persuasion, I think, is really important. And it's very difficult to get in school.
Perfect. Okay.
Can I just plus one to kind of what Rob said around understanding the numbers and the balance sheet and the finances? I would argue that in anything that we do in terms of the roles that we have or businesses that we support, you got to know the numbers. Whether you're an engineer, a UX designer, or in operations, you got to understand the numbers, right? What are the costs for the said service that you may be providing? What are the potential profit margins and revenue that we'd be expecting? Is there a value proposition to be made, right? These things, and understanding those numbers at the macro level, let's say at the company level, or even within your own department, or even within your own projects as you're managing them, you got to understand the numbers, because the fact that the business is investing in the work that it's requesting to be done. Well, how do we articulate, that we are on track, or how do we continue to articulate on whether we know we are on the right path, right? Because we always have to check. And part of it is looking at the numbers, not only about, hey, there's these really cool things that we get to build, which is actually really cool. But again, we do this in the context of supporting a business and achieving business outcomes. So in order to have that line of sight for the work that you're doing to that business impact, you have to understand the numbers.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that's an interesting twist to have you leaders talk about finance, sales skills, and writing with a bunch of technical people, which is usually on the other side of what they're interested in. So that's an interesting call out. So let's get into the technical aspect of things. What technologies are most used in your companies? And I guess I'll start with Sue, ladies first.
Well, I mean, Cloudflare, we do, we're in the cloud, right? It's cloud computing and network and things like that. So some of the technologies that are really important in cloud computing in general are the monitoring tools, right? And the delivery tools to get code into production. So things like Prometheus, Grafana, you know, Splunk, which we don't use at Cloudflare, but those types of monitoring tools are everyone in the company, but particularly in engineering, uses those tools, and the deeper understanding that you have of them, the more information you can get out of your data.
Great. Evan?
Yeah, I will. I mean, I'm gonna be a very basic answer. I mean, so, you know, in my current role, I'm the chief of staff for Uber in our IT department. So our most widely, utilized tools are for collaboration. You think about, basic things like email. Actually, back when I was in my freshman year of University of Albany, there was no email yet. So it's been quite a transformation. But email is definitely a thing. Obviously, our chat services that we use to collaborate amongst, in between teams, and also workflow platforms like Jira, where we organize, work between engineers and our set goals for the department, for the business. It's all tracked in workflow platforms. Like example is Jira. I'll tell you that another area that I know many companies invest in is in security. So you think about cybersecurity tooling in terms of how we do detection, how we do enforce access controls, monitor, access privileges around amongst different privileged user groups, and how do we validate them that they should continue having that level of access, is a thing that I would say a lot of companies, start off a little bit, grassroots manual to like fuller automations. So tools that I know are interesting in managing access, things like One Login, Duo, other applications like SailPoint, IIQ are very important for not only security controls, but also compliance controls. And we think about SOX as one of those, if you work for a public company, very relevant. And in terms of technologies to ensure companies are SOX compliant and meeting their controls, any tooling in these areas, again, many companies start off manual, right? There's a lot of low-hanging fruit, I believe, as companies are learning to be mature, that this type of automation would be needed. So around security and compliance.
Great. Rob, what are your thoughts? You see a lot.
Well, so I mean, certainly the applications Evan mentioned, and the fact that we're a cloud business, similar to Cloudflare is the case. We set ourselves up back in 2009, 14 years ago or so, when I started building the business, to be 100% cloud and not have any physicality to the business. Frankly, I often say at our company meetings, all we have are windows into the physical, into the digital world, whether it's on a Zoom session like this or a phone or whatever it may be. So the idea is less really for us about what is the technology and more about what is the value proposition that technology offers, whether that value proposition is offered by us to our customers or all of the applications we use internally, which are, literally hundreds of different SaaS, software as a service platforms for everything, internal, external facing, all the cost center capabilities, everything. And the way we assess our choices in choosing technology solutions is 100% predicated around the value that they offer and what it's going to cost us to have them serve us, whether it's cost in time or money. And I think that goes back a little bit to the way I'd be thinking about things if I were back at Albany, looking for my next job. It's less about the latest syntax for code, the latest method of storing data, or latest capability. It's more about perhaps joining a company that you can get excited about their value proposition, understand it, being able to easily articulate it, and get behind it.
Great. Thank you, Rob. That was excellent. Turning to the next question, and I'll start with you, Rob. What skills would you like to see from your technology job seekers? That's number one. And then number two, Rob, what are the essential skills you would see that are not from technical job seekers, such as sales, marketing, finance, and HR? Since you are the CEO, you have a lot of different parameters on how you look at who you hire and who you don't, or what you're looking for.
I think for technical job seekers, it would be people who are excited about solving problems. They're really into solving complex problems, not so much that they're especially astute at a certain technology capability. Those things can be learned, and actually relatively quickly, because we're moving up the stack. And we're not working in assembler the way we were in 1992, when I was at Albany, right? So this is you could pick up those skills quickly. The skill you want to see is grounded in integrity and authenticity, all those kind of people skills, is a person who really loves solving complex problems, finding the issues, bringing them to light and resolving them, and gets joy and satisfaction out of doing that. So that and to be able to do that well, you have to have a strong academic background, good sense for how to address a given problem. When it comes to the second part of the question, sales, marketing, some of these other areas, I think it's people that are willing to, as we say, sort of in Silicon Valley, approach things with a beginner's mind. Folks that aren't locked into just one way of doing things. Sales, as for example, is a very complex discipline, and lower level salespeople may just be repeating the exact same thing over and over. But if you want to progress, you have to learn how to really understand a potential client's business problems, how to map your solutions to that, and that requires approaching a situation with a beginner's mind. Same with marketing. What's happened with marketing in the last decade and a half is unprecedented in history, where we could all find one another, easily on Twitter or LinkedIn in seconds. The discipline of marketing has been turned on its head. Can you find ways as a marketer to almost get an unfair advantage in terms of your voice and reach in the world that's being just pounded with information on a daily basis and can't keep up? And then, finance and in the area of finance, I mean, I think it's, deep understanding of that area. And again, a willingness to stretch beyond the general bounds. And then HR, I think it's an understanding of what really makes people tick, understanding how to partner with senior executives on how to lock arms in terms of values of an organization, how to help develop a culture that's differentiated, how to treat people authentically, and meritocratically. Those are the types of things I think of.
Thank you. That's a very, very detailed area, very detailed response, which I think the students should get a lot out of once they unpack a lot of that. Sue, what about yourself? What are your thoughts?
I think you're going to see kind of the same thing, but what I look for when I'm hiring technical people is really curiosity. Like, are they curious about the problem space? Are they willing to go explore? Are they willing to take risk and expose the things that they don't know and chase those things down until they do know them? So it's a lot of the soft skills. Like if you know how to tackle a problem, the specific training that you have with specific technologies in general isn't the most important thing. That can be learned pretty quickly. You can switch to another job that's in another area, but it's those, you know, it's those problem solving skills. Like, how do you tackle the problem? Are you brave enough to go in there, you know, and face the problem even though you don't understand it yet, and just keep digging and digging until you understand it and understand the space and what's needed to drive success in that area.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Evan?
I would say first, I would say the you know, finding a job or getting a role, it's not a static kind of situation, right? It needs to be fluid, because even once you get the role, right, it is about, you know, are you handling the core aspects of the role, right? You want to establish that up front, right? So I do look for, when I look for talent, you know, what is that the one or two great things that they are good at or great at for the role that we're hiring for. Then, you know, and why I say it's fluid, right? We do want to find, you know, folks that have that kind of that edge, that ambition to not only take care of their core, but have they shown evidence where they've expanded beyond the thing that they were working on? Did they expand on their own skills to provide more impact, you know, in the situations or the roles that they had been previously? So always, I do look for those types of things in interviews, because, you know, I'll say in most companies, you know, or at Uber, you know, it is a very dynamic environment. The business model does change. The things that we have to support, you know, it's not changing on a daily basis, but we do have this appreciation for the dynamics of the business, and therefore we do need to flex towards those priorities. So when we think about the talent that we have, you know, one of the attributes I think that are pretty consistent amongst the staff is that they have established cores, but they also have this ambition to do more and learn more, because in doing more, you have more exposure, more opportunities. And guess what? That thing that maybe you weren't so familiar with, or maybe not so great at, but because you rose your hand for those opportunities and, you know, was audacious enough to, you know, be willing to fail to learn, that's okay, because that is what you are trying to get out of the situation as you make impacts to the business. Don't ever forget about yourself in that equation.
You know, that's an interesting statement, you know, fail to learn. A lot of folks look at, yeah, got to be successful, and if I fail, there's something wrong with that. But the thing is, sometimes you look at a failure as a setup for a comeback, right? And that's a beautiful thing. I think, you know, another thing is a growth mindset. That's a big one out there these days. Is to make sure you have a growth mindset, as Rob mentioned. Keep learning things. Keep Susan mentioned. Keep learning things. Stretch yourself. Perfect. All right, that turns us to another question, and I'll let Evan, you respond first on this one. How did you get your first job out of Albany? Number one, and then number two, did networking play a role in that? And attaining that role?
Yes, 100%. All right. So here's something I'm going to share with everyone. We're all friends here, I guess. Something that's not on my LinkedIn profile. My first job after UAlbany. I was graduating in May of '99. It was, I guess, at the height of the .com boom. So instead of going to work for one of the big consulting companies that were around that time, I decided to go for my .com dream. And it was a small company called Delivering.com. They're no longer in business. Shortly after, it was the .com bust. So it was the company was dissolved, and I was like, oh man, what do I do now? Fresh out of college, first 6 months, I'm looking for my second job already. And that's where networking absolutely helped. Right? I had a good friend of mine that I met during my undergrad years of UA. He wound up going to General Electric. I know General Electric is a huge recruit heavily out of University of Albany. And he introduced me to one of the introductory information management leadership programs there. He said, you know what, just you know, I'll introduce you to the recruiting team. I did my interviews and I eventually got the role. But without that upfront connection to say, hey, why don't you look here? Honestly, I think I would have been, you know, trying to figure out how to pursue this next step at that time, especially again, 6 months out of graduating university, looking for that my second job already. So the networking aspect, and also, I would also say the learning from that experience has stuck with me my entire career. Anytime I can give back, anytime I could introduce someone to an opportunity that I believe would make sense for them, I would do it. So it's just, yeah, that's how I got into, I did 12 years at GE, and then until LinkedIn called, and I moved out to the West Coast 12 years later.
Excellent. Rob, how about you? What was your first role out of Albany, and did network play a part in obtaining this role?
Not directly. I got my first role as an intern at Anderson Consulting in the summer of 1994, my junior year. I heard about them recruiting on campus in 92. I think them at Delta Sigma Pi. I was in the business fraternity, and I knew that I really wanted to have that internship because it would help me get a job coming out. There was only one spot, I remember, and so I kind of laser focused in on that. I still think to today that was statistically the best thing I've ever accomplished in terms of numbers and getting a certain, getting a break. But that was a interesting experience. And then coming back senior year, I was sort of the ambassador senior year for Anderson on campus, and wound up getting a lot of other options, but went there and began my career there and spent 4.5 years there.
Perfect. All right, Sue, what was your first job out of Albany?
Well, so I did a co-op at IBM over in Boca Raton. Towards my years were a little funny because I kind of flew through school, but like in my junior year, I did an 8-month co-op at IBM in Boca. So I think that helped me get my interview with IBM in Tampa, which is where I had my first job, because I know that they did check, on my work there, but also my father worked there. So that might have helped get my resume seen. I think, from a networking perspective, like what the network does typically is help your resume get seen, not help you get hired, right? Because I think if someone shows me a resume, like I might look at it and might not have seen it otherwise, but I'm always going to hire the most qualified. So, but networking probably did help in my case.
And thank you, Sue, for that, because you led into the next question is, what was your advice about developing a network that the students should consider, as they're looking to bring themselves into the.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's kind of two different aspects for developing the network in my view, or really there's three, I suppose, but one that I think is really good that a lot of college students don't tap into is being a member of clubs or sports or what have you, with where you have interactions with people who are graduating before you, like even 2 years before you, 1 year before you. It makes a difference because you talk to them, you understand what the work environment is like. Potentially they can help you network and get jobs. But I think even more importantly, it takes a lot of the mystique away of, what it's like to go out and have a full-time job. And then, I think also there's, like when I look at what the best ways are for college students to use networks, and I have one daughter who just graduated college and 2 who are seniors this year, so it's something I've given a fair amount of thought to. I think the key things are finding out what different jobs are like and what kinds of jobs are even out there. Like just talking to people, whether it's, people who have graduated before you, people that your parents know, like however you can meet people. It doesn't have to be so that they can help you find a job, but to understand what their job is like and to get an idea of the shape of job that you really would be interested in, so you can go into that interview super enthusiastic about where you're going. I mentioned that having having the network can get your resume moved to the top of the pile, which does help, especially for new college hires, right? Because the piles are sometimes deep, and it just makes sure your resume gets looked at to see if you're appropriate. The other thing that I think is a really good use of people in your network is to do practice interviews with them. Whether they be like, you'll find that when you go out there and interview, that you'll be interviewing with people 3 years older than you and people 20 years older than you. Like, that's the way the interview process works. So like, if your parents have friends who would be willing to interview you, as a practice interview, like, do that. Do practice interviews with your friends or cousins who are 2 years ahead of you. Like, it I think makes a big difference. You can get feedback from them, but also just get more comfortable with the process.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a great idea. Practice interviews. Rob, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think there's two parts to why you develop a network. One is, of course, to help with the job and whatnot. But the other one is just to get a perspective on what you actually want to go do with the rest of your life, or at least begin to do with the rest of your life when you leave school. And so the advice I would give is make sure you form or participate in either groups or form bonds with certain friends on campus or within the university system. They can help you make some of those decisions. As I mentioned, I was part of, Delta Sigma Pi, and I still remember, I think it was my sophomore year when, I knew coming out of Albany, I'd need to have a job of some kind, and I was interested in business. And the two primary at the time areas to go into were either accounting or information technology. And I remember one of the brothers, I guess, called in the fraternity, it was a she, said to me, this technology thing is really taking off. You really want to consider that as the direction. And I remember thinking about it that night and taking basic and COBOL and other programming stuff and being into it and thinking, okay, yeah, I'm probably going to lean in that direction. But I made that call in sophomore year, and it was based on, an interaction I had with someone I respected. I remember in the student center there, one day. So if I hadn't been part of that fraternity, if I hadn't been part of that group, I'm not sure I would have been given that nudge in a certain direction that wound up being something I did, for the next, whatever is going on, close to 30 years now.
Outstanding. Evan.
I'd say one thing I wish I did more of was in terms of building a network, while even in my undergrad years, was honestly take advantage of the professors' office hours. Many of the professors at the university have real experience in the field that they're instructing for, right? So what better way to get an understanding of the field or the roles that you may be interested in early on? What's better than interviewing them and spending time in their office hours to ask them about this type of advice? And who knows where the conversation will go? Perhaps you get just general advice. Perhaps you get a specific pointer to work on or a specific forum to attend, right? These things, don't just happen magically, right? You have to kind of put yourself out there, look for the opportunities of who would know the information that will help inform my decision on what I want to do when I graduate, right? I think leveraging professors' office hours would be a great facility for that. It's something I wish I did more.
Great. Yeah, words of wisdom coming out there. I know that from my experience, I had a great conversation with a grad student from South Africa when I was there, and he talked me into the Peace Corps, which totally changed my life. All right, so we're winding down on this. We're going to open the mic, or should I say, for some questions coming in from the students at 7:50. So I've got a few more minutes, but one of the hot questions, folks, that came from the students were, what's happening around artificial intelligence and machine learning? And if you could tell us what your perspective is on how that's going on in your business, that would be great. I'll start with you, Sue, because you have a few different ways of looking at it. You can look at it from a Salesforce perspective and a Cloudflare perspective. And then Evan, you look at Uber, and then Rob, you're doing a lot of great things with your platform.
Yeah, so from an AI and ML perspective, at Cloudflare, right, we use that technology primarily for security and monitoring, right? Intrusion detection, like all of these types of things in security really lend themselves well to AI and ML, because it's analyzing a ton of data to see what's going on and, you know, see where the bad guys are and things like that. So there's that kind of back-end use case that's, I think, pretty widely used by cloud companies for AI and ML. And then, you know, when you look at like the way Salesforce would use it, of course, they would use it the same way, but there would also be, in that case, more capabilities exposed to the customers to help them to be able to better understand their data, right? Their data trends and, you know, and what's going on there.
Great. Okay. Evan?
Yeah, I'll talk about it from, you know, I mean, Uber does use, you know, obviously AI and ML in terms of our, a lot of our end products, right? You see in terms of, you know, our rideshare business, as well as our delivery business around, you know, what are the market trends? I would say this in general, right? Some of this is all kind of secret sauce in terms of, you know, how we build algorithms to understand, you know, when we need more supply for drivers, or where the demand will be in terms of riders and things like that. It's like, won't touch too much around those predictive analytics that are done on the platform itself, but internally, you know, where we do apply machine learning is actually improving the overall user experience, right? So, you know, one of the things IT manages for the company is like basically the productivity of our workforce. So when there are, you know, I guess trends or issues on certain types of ticket types that we are seeing in terms of issues that our user base is experiencing, well, can we get predictive analytics around what those causes, what the root causes of those problems may be? Yes, we do apply it there. And in fact, it helps advise where we would apply more automation and bots around supporting the user experience, rather than having individual human beings or let's say a help desk bar, you know, staffed with individuals providing support, right? How can we get, you know, I guess automated or intelligent self-serve support using chat bots to help enhance the user experience? And we believe it, you know, the user experience is enhanced when they get their problems solved quicker than they would with a regular human interaction. So we do apply the AI kind of learning to our internal processes for better automations.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. And students, you know, one of the things I've seen in doing some research for the panel is their blogs on each of their off their websites are excellent. Uber has an excellent blog regarding their network. Cloudflare has some great stuff. And then Rob, you have some great stuff that is on your website. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with machine learning and AI? It's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said earlier, the amount of information that's hitting us on a daily basis is growing exponentially. So obviously, AI capabilities can help people begin to make sense of that growing data set. So with Coupa, you know, we've been, as I mentioned, building up the company for the last decade and a half. We are growing an exponential amount of data around how businesses spend money. In fact, we're closing in on $4 trillion in cumulative spend that we've helped companies manage. And by the way, I would look it up as Sue and Evan were talking, both Uber and Cloudflare are our customers. So we have this information on how companies spend money. Now, what we do is we sanitize that information, we anonymize that information, and we normalize that information into pools where we can look for patterns, apply technology that looks for patterns in that information that could then provide insights or prescriptions to each individual customer based on the knowledge of the collective. For example, what is the best time to reorder certain categories of spend based on given price points, or based on what we're seeing in your environment, there's a high likelihood of fraud, or you're being over invoiced by your suppliers, or things of that nature. So we're continuing to develop this capability. And what's exciting for us is we're proudly and one of the first few in the enterprise software world at scale that's beginning to apply these types of ideas onto mass data sets. So again, back to kind of students here, if you're thinking about kind of companies you'd want to be working at or being part of, you know, if you're into AI ML, think about where are the big data sets that you might be able to apply that intelligence to, so you can help people and help companies. And obviously, you know, I'm sure the vast majority of folks have taken an Uber, certainly understand what Uber is. I mean, just, you know, the ability to be at that point, place, and time with the optimal individual that's ready to take you from point A to point B at the exact price point that you're willing to pay, given the current environment of supply and demand. That's incredible building blocks upon which societies can continue to develop these technologies and these approaches.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Panel. All right. I'm trying to run a tight ship here. So it's now 7:50 in New York. And Melissa, we're going to go to the questions. We got a few questions. We have 10 questions in there. So
Yes, we do. We've got questions coming in quickly. So I'm going to read them out, and then whoever wants to jump in and kind of share their thoughts, please do. The first question is from Ruben. What type of advice would you give a senior just getting into the workforce?
I'm happy to go. You know, my view is I would look at the first definitely 5 years, maybe the first decade of your career, is the continued learning that you've had for up to that point. I always look at it as, you know, you had, 5 years as in elementary school, 2-3 years in middle school, whatever, is 4 years in high school, 4 years in college. Then you get into some kind of rhythm. So, in the work world. And so make sure that every 3 to 5 years, you're stretching and growing and having a whole host of different experiences as you form, your overall career trajectory.
great advice.
I would say, one of the hardest things for me to hire for at Uber is Uber tribal knowledge, right? You can't hire that off the street. So advice I would give a senior at the beginning of their career, if you're doing internship, hopefully you pick one where you landed an opportunity with a potential company that you would want to work for, upon graduation, because that's where you will pick up on that tribal knowledge on how things kind of work at the department that you're doing the internship at, or the company that you're doing this for, right? At the same time, as you understand tribal knowledge, you get to understand the vernacular of the team. And guess what that starts looking like? It gives you an avenue to continue to build your network, because you have a context that you can, that you have a common context with other people that are in that business. So if you have an internship at a potential company you want to work at, just invest your time. It is well worth it. Invest your time understanding, again, what the tribal knowledge is, and you continue building your network, because that's where you're going to really understand, or start really understanding and have data points for you to judge for yourself around, is this the environment that I want to be at? Do I want to continue being here in long term, right? So that's something that I think is very helpful or useful for, again, beginnings of careers, because if you have to make a pivot, that's okay. But the sooner you make the pivot, the better, right? Or if you know that you're at a place that you are enjoying, that you find that there's going to be an opportunity to grow here, well, then you double down and you invest more, and you kind of, anchor into, hey, what is this company really about? How do I do more? How do I provide more impact? And I talked about earlier on, where as long as you have a core area where you're going to do well, and that's your base, then you can take these opportunities of risk to expand and try to do new things for that business. But it all starts with understanding some of the tribal knowledge. I'll be honest with you. There's no handbook that you learn on day one. Here's how things work. That's not the real world. That doesn't happen.
All right, we have another question. It's kind of interesting. Did you have any work experiences outside of this industry that helped you excel in your career? maybe something more along the lines of those soft skills that you were all talking about.
I worked at Kmart when I was in high school and college, and that really inspired me to do well in college.
So did I. Well, okay.
No, I actually have a funny parallel kind of to this. I'd say my job when I was at the University of Albany, you know, I had a part-time job. It wasn't necessarily work. I actually worked at the off-track betting parlor at 777 Central Avenue. I think horse racing is big in the capital region. But in that experience, I was a ticket puncher. And what you would do, because you're not punching tickets all day, you're talking to the people. You see so many different characters and different and with all different backgrounds. So one of the things that I don't know if it was just it helped me understand that I was good at it or something I could continue to build upon, but understanding people, understanding, you know, how they like to receive information, how they learn, because those answers are very important for, you know, again, I have a program management discipline background. But in order to get those effective outcomes in terms of working with people, you have to understand how they want to receive information, how they learn, and what are those things that would help them make a decision that, you know, you are believing is going to be the most, you know, effective outcome for that program. So I'll say, because my understanding of learning and talking to people, I was a ticket puncher at the horse track parlor. And it made me confident, like, hey, I could talk to anybody in this world. It doesn't matter, right? So that did help me a lot.
Great. If you could go back to school as an undergrad, asked Isaiah, would you study cybersecurity or digital forensics, or maybe something else? I see a lot of pondering. Anybody want to take that one?
I'm pondering because I don't necessarily see them as those two things as distinct things. I believe, you know, there's you know, digital forensics and cybersecurity. You're either helping prevent attacks, or if an attack has happened, you're trying to understand what happened on that attack surface.
I think I'm at UAlbany. Digital forensics is part of our business school. That's a different major, and cybersecurity is its own college. And so maybe for the students, they're seeing those as a either, you know, or, right? It sounds like you're saying maybe some of both would be.
Well, what's interesting is that if you take a look at those two, in certain aspects, those two would be in the same security house to a degree, right? So I think do what they love, and then sometimes that will change when you get into the workforce. You may find a different path, but my advice is do what you love, and then you'll find happiness on the other side once you graduate in the position or the culture that you're looking for.
Right.
I think that's right. I mean, I've had family members ask me, because they're in college and they're going to go to graduate school for business, and like one of my nephews was asking me, you know, well, should I do cybersecurity for, you know, as part of my business degree? Because everyone says that's where the, you know, where the money is and what's interesting. And I said, well, I don't know. Are you interested in cybersecurity? And he said, no. I said, then no. Right? I mean, you know, you should like learn enough about the various topics and then go there and find out if you like it, like take a class or two and see.
Right.
Okay. All right. We have a question. If you had a college mentee, what would you tell him or her to do to prepare for a technology career outside of going to classes, of course? You know, obviously you've already made some suggestions, but is there anything that you didn't mention that, you know, if it was your niece or nephew or someone you were mentoring, what would you be telling them to do now as students?
I think one of the things I tell the young people in my life that's kind of building on what I was just talking about is to really think about what kind of company you want to work with, and what kind of technology you want to work for. And no job's going to be perfect, right? It's a job and the jobs pay. So, you know, I'm not saying be super, super picky, but you should understand yourself and understand what you want and what motivates you. You know, there are certain companies out there that pay an absolute fortune, right? Should everyone try and get into those companies? I don't know, like one of my daughters isn't, right? You know, you really need to think about what's important to you. Like what, you know, if you're going to work for the next 25 years, and granted, you'll change paths along the way, like it's a windy road, but like what's going to give you that start that can actually like pump up your enthusiasm, which is going to make you have a better career in the long run, right? So of course you have to, and especially in college, you think a lot about, well, do they want me? But also think about, do I want them? Like give a little more thought to that, and a little, you know, draw down on the fear and think of it from the perspective of you're an individual person. What is it that's right for you in your career?
Great. All right. Another question. Rob mentioned wishing he'd had more training in sales. As students, how can we work on that skill now?
Try to sell something. You know, that was what, you know, they always say, you know, the test, can you sell something? I mean, I had that exposure at Albany. I said in the business fraternity. I mean, we had to raise money. We sold pizza in the campus center. We had all kinds of other, you know, ideas of ways to raise money, do volunteer work, and convince others to allow our fraternity to have an event at their place. I mean, actually practice selling, articulating a value proposition, and getting person on the other side to accept it. And that could be done in your academic life, but also in, you know, in your personal life over the summers, you know, things like that.
Yeah. You know, the other way they can do it is what I did is that at Albany, I was a ski salesman at Carol Reed that was in Crossgates, and that was something that I loved to do, and that helped me in my sales career because, you know, that allows you to understand your customers and the outcomes that they're looking for in a situation where you're an expert at something, and then you can transfer those skills over to your professional sales career, right? By understanding the process and how you went through that. But first, find something that you love to do, and then try to sell that, or should I say, persuade someone into, you know, enjoying what you love, and then that will help you on the trail to becoming a sales professional or a marketeer.
And perhaps for those who are more introverted, where like actually selling would be beyond something that they would consider, like maybe you can think about it as influencing, right? It's that whole, I think, Rob, if that's what you were getting at with the selling, right? Like I don't know that money needs to exchange hands. It can be the selling of ideas, right? The influencing of thought and action.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because there's a sales engineer that goes with the salesperson so that you're more technical, and you're much more technically astute on the product, and you don't necessarily get into the persuasion or the deal making on that side. So there's a lot of opportunities.
I just want to add one more thing in terms of this, an answer to like, how do you practice selling? I think we all are in the business of ourselves as well, right? Like we are the CEO of our own, you know, our own careers, right? So when you think about selling, one of the aspects you always have to think about in terms of your interactions that you come across with any professional that you do interact with in your career, early on or even later, treat every interaction as if it is an interview, right? Because that's where you get an opportunity to, you know, you do market yourself in terms of how you carry yourself, the ideas that you share, the tone, the energy that you show up with, right? All is a part of the package of like what your value proposition is. So you should be confident and sell that, you know, as you work and interact with people in your career.
Yeah, great advice. Here's another question. I'm a senior and I've never had an internship. How much more difficult will it be for me to get a job? I feel like I'm behind compared to everyone else. What would you recommend?
Small
think that's
amount of
some-
time.
Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead.
It's a small amount of time to be behind. You have the rest of your life ahead of you. You know, Evan just shared a story of what happened to him 6 months out and how he used the network to get another role and to develop his career. You're not behind. I mean, and it's just a matter of leveraging the folks around you, leveraging the school system, leveraging your background interests and moving forward. I wouldn't feel behind.
Yeah, I would
Armin asks, oh, I'm sorry, Evan, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, everyone is on their own journey, right? It's okay, right? You know, again, I plus one to what Rob said. This is not about being behind. It's about, hey, you know, whatever your thoughts are and around where that question is coming from, around like why you would even say you're behind, right? Perhaps there's some data points or lessons learned that you've come across. Don't take those as failures, right? Those are learning opportunities to apply for ultimately how you're going to get your dream job, right? Those are lessons learned. It is not something where, oh, I didn't get the actual answer I wanted, and then I stopped. No, let me take that. Let me try to understand why I didn't get it. How do I kind of help shape and improve my game, right? To learn from the opportunities, so when the next one comes up, I'm even more prepared, right? That's the way to think about it. Don't think of it as like, oh, there's a schedule and now you're behind, and just seemingly like, I don't know, and then the tone of the question kind of felt like, oh, it's insurmountable. No, everyone's their own journey, right? And everyone is going, deserves the right to the pursuit of happiness, right? So take those learnings, apply those lessons, and get back on that horse.
It is also the case. I've seen I've seen college or close to college graduates do this. Like, if you don't feel comfortable with your resume as you go out and, look for a job because of the lack of internship, like, I agree with Evan and Rob, I think you can work around it. But if you don't feel comfortable and prepared without having had that internship, which the internship can be valuable not only to help you get a job, but also to understand what the workplace is like and what you would look for in a workplace, then you can, and University of Albany probably doesn't want me to say this, but you can go a couple of credits short so that you have to push off your graduation a semester and you can get an internship next summer.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. All right. Armin asks, I hand you a resume of a fresh university grad. What is the first thing you look for? I think kind of an accompanying question that I've often heard is, what's going to turn you off? What are you going to see on that resume where you're like, no, I'm done looking. So what are you looking for and what are you not looking for?
If it's hard to read, it's hard to, like, you often don't get all the way through it.
Yeah, 1 page, bullets that make sense. Talk about accomplishments. It's got to be authentic and real. If you feel like people are overhyping up what they did in the past, that's a big turnoff. Those are the first things that come to mind.
Yeah, I'll answer the turnoff question first. I mean, honestly, if there's typos, if there's misspellings or things like that, it's not necessarily the typo that's the deal breaker. It's more about, hey, if this is a piece of work, right, in terms of a resume that's going to represent you, but you have not taken the due diligence to make sure those typos or it's not, of pristine, quality, well, then it's a reflection of the candidate, right? So that's why when I see things like that, where, hey, the example provided is a lower or something that is obviously sub-quality because of the typos, then it does kind of weigh on your opinion around like the overall profile of the candidate. And things that would help, again, if you think about who are in these kind of hiring roles at a company, they're probably looking through many, many resumes, probably even hundreds up to hundreds in a given week or month, right? So how do you get to stand out? Well, I agree with what Rob said. Something that's easy to understand, bullet points that are not too verbose, right? What is the point that you're trying to make, right? And kind of be in and be out. Don't expand on every single bullet point of all your entire experience. That is actually, hopefully what you would have an opportunity to articulate during interviews. So you have a little bit more longer verse type of questions during an interview. Don't try to accomplish all of that on a resume.
All right, I think, why don't we make this our last question, if you will. What, you all given a lot of advice, shared some great insights tonight. Is there maybe one thought that you have that sort of didn't come up in the questions we've asked? One last piece of advice you would like to share with students as they're kind of contemplating completing their degrees and creating a career in this field?
I would say balancing the academic and professional pursuits with an awareness that the 4-year college experience is a once in a lifetime special experience. And I think what I remember from school is there's some people over-indexed on the great time and under focused on academics, and then there was the other extreme as well. And I would say, you could learn a lot about how to compartmentalize things in your life early on if you try to get a little bit of both of those, or the right amount of both of those during the 4-year experience.
Great. What do you think? So
yeah, and I think, again, thinking about who you want to be, where you want to be, who you want to be with. I think that's really important while you're in school, and then also thinking about it, when you're out of school, and then, don't be afraid to do something different than what everyone else is doing. Like, most of the people who are really successful didn't follow the paths that others would have laid out for them. They went into the wonky spaces with the hard problems that no one else wanted to go and solve, right? And so don't be afraid.
I love it. Wonky spaces. Okay, Evan.
No, yeah, I mean, like a +1 to take those risks earlier in your career path. I mean, you don't know where these opportunities, where it would lead you. I'll tell you, I never thought I was like I said in the beginning, I never thought I was going to leave New York. I never thought I was going to leave GE. I thought I was a GE lifer, right? But it wasn't until, let's say, the Silicon Valley opportunity came up at LinkedIn, and then I went through it later. But it was a discussion I had with my fiance at that time on whether I would entertain moving out to California, right, and work for a tech company and leave GE. And her question back to me as we were discussing it was, hey, Evan, if you're like 80 years old and your whole life story is like New York, New York, New York, and GE, are you gonna be happy with that? I was like, I don't know. And then she's like, well, if you don't know, we gotta go. And so, trusting your loved ones, trusting your mentors, your family and friends, it is important to check in with them to help make some important decisions. But without them, I wouldn't have taken the risk that I now know I needed to take back then. I just didn't know any better. And that's where it just opened up a whole new perspective, a whole new set of doors that I never even thought was going to be available for a kid growing up from Jackson Heights. And now, I just so fortunate enough to be the chief of staff of Uber engineering department. So be open to those risks, right?
Right.
Be afraid.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great. John, back to you.
Wow, I don't know what more I could say to that one. I think, I guess regardless of your major, hopefully everyone took away something from this event, a new concept, a fresh idea on technology. And as Evan mentioned, perhaps the notion of getting outside of New York State to pursue something in another state, in another country. We have great leaders that we have the opportunity to hear from today. I'm so blessed that you all elected to spend this time with us, students. and panelists. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you in California in a tech role sometime.
Awesome.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.